According to the Congressional Digest, a monthly publication given to provide news of what's occurring within our nation's capital, who quotes the Hate Crime Statistic Act of 1990, hate crimes is, quote, crimes that manifest evidence based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity, including where appropriate the crimes of murder, non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, aggravated assault, simple assault, intimidation, arson, and destruction, damage, or vandalism of property. Within recent years, hate crimes has become a hot topic, and in fact, in 2007, Congress introduced a bill entitled the Local Law Enforcement Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2007. Civil rights, education, religious, and civic organizations across America, in fact over 230 of them, not including law enforcement agencies and attorney generals, support this bill. Clearly, by sheer support alone, this bill represents some importance. Now, there are two basic sides to this issue, the opponents and the proponents. The proponents believe the problem is that people aren't prosecuted for certain acts done against others within society. The cause, they say, is the personal preference of a particular person externalizes in the form of prejudice. And they believe the cure, like done in 2007 with this bill, is that the bill was actually introduced, which basically outlined how to prevent this sort of action against the people. And the cost is that GovTrack statistics provide us with the following figure: $1 per American over the 2008 to 2012 time period. The proponents, they believe the problem is that introducing any legislation at all is the root of the problem. The cause is that there is more to the agenda than meets the eye, and the cure is not to introduce any legislation at all, and of course the cost of this is free. Constitutional issues were at stake with this bill, as outlined within the ACLU, quote, such action is particularly timely as a response to the rising tide of violence directed at people because of such characteristics. Those crimes convey a constitutionally unprotected threat against the peaceful enjoyment of public places to members of the targeted group. Now, in regards to such characteristics within the quote, the ACLU alludes, as to earlier with the definition of hate crimes, race, color, religion, gender, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or even disability. The ACLU as well anticipates opposition from the religious right and wants to calm any such opposition. Therefore, they add in their document a provision that would basically say that this baggage is disregarded. In relation to prosecution of Christian beliefs, this is what I would like to discuss today. Hate crimes in the past have shown to be negatively aimed towards Christians, and I believe this piece of legislation will prove to have such a result. An excellent way to learn about such issues is to look at areas that before have instituted such legislation, and a prime example would be Canada. As the saying goes, if you don't learn from history, you are doomed to repeat it. Canada is known today for being notoriously in support of hate crimes, and in fact continues to forward the opinion that the government can regulate whatsoever they please. In fact, back in 2004, Canada added, probably with flying colors, sexual orientation to the list that outlines what defines a hate crime. Then, just as one example, a little over a year later, a Christian by the name of Bill Walcott sent out leaflets attacking homosexuals, and therefore, a little afterwards, the police were sent after him as a result. Canada continues in its downward spiral, and now pastors today even fear what might result if they preach hate speech against those who might be protected in the anti-discrimination area of the government's laws. Now, steering back to America, Pelosi said, I believe it was May 4th, 2007, that in support of this bill, that it would make America more American. Now, I don't know about everyone else, but if passing such legislation makes America more American, does all the issues in the northern country make Canada more Canadian? Should we model ourselves after a nation in this respect? I believe the answer is a definite no. Given the issue raised by the ACLU concerning constitutional issues, and that men and women should be treated fairly reasonable, is an excellent point. Pelosi even mentioned in her speech alluded to a moment ago, the Founding Fathers would be all for what they were promoting. However, a prime point they forget is that our nation was founded upon biblical principles. Within those principles, those whom Christians might discriminate against, mainly those of homosexual foundations, are vehemently condemned. Now, people might respond and say that we're for a theocracy with God at the head of our government, but I respond that we have to extrapolate our rules from somewhere. There is no such thing as a randomly created principle. All thoughts and opinions must originate from somewhere. And I believe with all my heart that the greatest place from which to obtain our foundations is the Bible. Everything else comes after that. And the Founding Fathers as well believed this principle. I believe the underlying issue is this. Promoting the homosexual agenda is the main reason why this legislation was brought forth, and to provide special privileges for this minority group. Christians, in retrospect, are adversely affected as a result. This is a quote on WorldNet Daily. Quote, "A fast-track congressional plan to add special protection for homosexuals to federal law would turn thoughts, feelings, and beliefs into criminal offenses and put Christians in the bullseye," according to opponents. Now, this might be called a slippery slope, except in this case it is true and established fact since we have a concrete precedent set in place, and it should be realized that the negative result is definitely within the future, mainly that of Christians being prosecuted as a result of this legislation. They say that people like Christians won't be affected in this way, seemingly ignoring what's already occurred in other countries. I find it interesting that those whom groups like the ACLU desire to protect usually have zero tolerance for those who already have exercised zero tolerance for them. Apparently the belief system of Christians offends them, and therefore they need to quench it. They think in terms of what is called the fallacy of ignoring a common cause, believing that since the system condemns homosexuality, the natural outcome is that hate arises towards the person and violence results. However, the totally opposite is true, or at least it should be. Typically labeled as hating the sin and loving the sinner, Christians take the action to convert the person from their wicked ways, and the so-called victim reacts negatively. They are motivated out of concern for their fellow men and not hate. So as a conclusion, let me reiterate the issues at stake here. On one side, there's those who support it, yet don't really delve into the issue at stake. Mainly, people would be discriminated against as a result of anti-discrimination legislation. And in fact, there are precedents in place already that show such a result occurs. The opponents realize the dangers of these hate crime bills and believe that no approach should be taken. In fact, the whole issue needs to be left alone. The benefits outlined by proponents ultimately end up being harms to the overall system and, in fact, toward our foundational beliefs in the Constitution.